Look at this photograph. A group of men in suits stand proudly at a NASA facility. One of them is shaking hands with President John F. Kennedy. His name is Wernher von Braun. He is credited as the father of the American space program, the man who put astronauts on the moon. What the official biography leaves out is this: 12 years earlier, Wernher von Braun was an SS officer. He personally selected concentration camp prisoners to build his rockets in underground tunnels. More civilians died building those rockets than were ever killed by them. So how did he end up at NASA? The answer is a classified US government program called Operation Paperclip. And once you understand how it worked, you'll never look at the Cold War the same way again. It's May 1945. The war in Europe is over. Nazi Germany has collapsed. American intelligence officers are moving fast, not to arrest Germany's top scientists, to recruit them. The race isn't against the Nazis anymore. It's against the Soviet Union, which is doing exactly the same thing on the other side of Germany. The program is called Operation Overcast, then renamed Operation Paperclip, named for the paperclips used to attach new background files to the scientists' records. New files, cleaner files, files that told a different story. The U.S. Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, the JIOA, had a mandate to identify and extract the most valuable scientific minds in the Reich: aerospace engineers, rocket scientists, chemists, doctors, and bring them to America to work for the U.S. government. There was just one problem. President Truman had explicitly ordered that no one with an active Nazi Party membership, no one who had been more than a nominal participant in Nazi activities, could be admitted to the United States under the program. Almost every single scientist on the list violated that requirement. So the JIOA did something remarkable. They simply rewrote the files. Nazi Party memberships were removed from dossiers. SS affiliations were omitted. War crimes investigations that were already underway were quietly buried. In some cases, scientists who were under active denazification proceedings in Germany were extracted before the proceedings could conclude. The paperclip, the physical paperclip, was attached over the incriminating pages, hence the name. Wernher von Braun's file was altered to downgrade his SS rank and remove references to his direct use of concentration camp labor at the Mittelwerk facility, an underground factory carved into a mountain by prisoners from the Dora concentration camp. More than 20,000 people died there. Von Braun later claimed he had no choice, that he never personally mistreated anyone. Survivors of Dora remembered him differently. He wasn't alone. Walter Schreiber was a Nazi general and physician who oversaw medical experiments on prisoners: freezing, high-altitude pressure experiments, deliberate infection with deadly diseases. The JIOA brought him to the United States. He worked at the USAF School of Medicine in Texas. When a journalist exposed him in 1952, the U.S. Air Force quietly flew him to Argentina rather than face a congressional inquiry. Kurt Blome ran the Nazi biological weapons program. He was tried at Nuremberg for conducting plague experiments on concentration camp prisoners. He was acquitted on a technicality. Within months, the U.S. Army had recruited him. His knowledge of biological warfare was considered too valuable to leave behind. By the time Operation Paperclip officially ended in 1990, more than 1,600 scientists, engineers, and their family members had been brought to the United States under the program. Here's where it gets complicated, because what these men built is genuinely impressive and genuinely troubling for exactly that reason. Wernher von Braun led the development of the Saturn V rocket. Without him, the Apollo program may not have succeeded. The moon landing, one of humanity's greatest achievements, was built in part on technology developed for the Third Reich by a man who used slave labor to develop it. Arthur Rudolph, von Braun's operations director at Mittelwerk, managed the Saturn V program at NASA. He was so central to the program, he received NASA's highest honor, the Distinguished Service Medal. In 1984, the U.S. Department of Justice caught up with him. Rather than face prosecution, he renounced his American citizenship and returned to Germany. Hubertus Strughold became the father of American space medicine. His research into how the human body responds to high altitude and pressurization formed the foundation of astronaut training. A building at Brooks Air Force Base was named after him. In 2006, it was quietly renamed after it became publicly known that he had overseen experiments on Dachau prisoners. If you watched our first episode, this next part will hit differently. The same pipeline that brought Nazi scientists into NASA also fed directly into the CIA programs that became MKUltra. Kurt Blome wasn't the only one. Nazi doctors who had conducted psychological experiments, sensory deprivation, extreme stress, drug-induced altered states, were debriefed by US intelligence in the late 1940s. Their methodology, their data, their conclusions about breaking the human mind were absorbed into what would become the CIA's Behavioral Control Research Program. The CIA didn't invent mind control research from scratch. They imported it. Project Artichoke, the precursor to MKUltra, explicitly referenced captured Nazi research in its early documents. The men running these programs knew exactly where the data came from. They considered it too useful to ignore. Operation Paperclip was classified for decades. The public knew pieces of it. Von Braun was famous, his past whispered about but never officially acknowledged. But the full scope of the program, the deliberate falsification of records, the war criminals brought in and protected, that stayed buried. It was a journalist named Linda Hunt who began pulling the thread in the 1980s, eventually publishing a book in 1991, Secret Agenda, that documented the program in detail using declassified FOIA requests. Some of the scientists she named were still alive. Some had died as respected American citizens. The US government did not officially acknowledge the full scope of Operation Paperclip until the 1990s. Some files remain classified to this day. Here's what Operation Paperclip actually tells us. Not that America is uniquely evil. The Soviet Union ran a mirror version of the same program, and the moral calculus was identical on both sides. What it tells us is what governments actually prioritize when the survival pressure is high enough. The rules that apply in peacetime, war crimes trials, immigration law, basic accountability, these become optional when the stakes are perceived to be existential. The men who signed off on Paperclip were not monsters. They were pragmatists who made a calculation. The knowledge inside these men's heads was worth more than the justice owed to their victims. Whether that calculation was correct is something historians still debate. What isn't debatable is that it was made, deliberately, in writing, with full knowledge of what these men had done, and then classified for 50 years so the American public couldn't have that debate themselves. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's the document. If you found this useful, subscribe. Next episode, we're going further back. 1933, an attempted fascist coup on American soil that Congress investigated and then buried. Most Americans have never heard of it. That story is coming.